Awesome. Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Zero to One. We're really excited to welcome both new and those who've been with us on the journey so far as well. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We're excited this week to have our guest Lindy Heng with us, and she's going to share some of her story from being, working in a corporate environment in some of the biggest companies in the world to now forming her own business and the sort of the bumps and hurdles that she went along the way. Always what we like to do before we kick off and go into like the main topic of the day is to just sort of get a bit of a feel for where everybody is in the world, because we do have members in all different corners of the earth in that sense. So if you could just maybe pop a quick note in the chat, just sort of where you're dialing in from, it'd be really great just to see where everyone is right now. So I can definitely see some new names in there. Hi Marcelo, good to see you again. Glad you could join us. I know you have your classes sometimes, right? So it's good to see you. Rainy, humid in Singapore. Yes, the rain is, if anyone here is in Singapore, it's pretty crazy right now. So thanks also for dialing in today. I know I think it's one of those days where everyone's staying and hang on from that point of view, which is good. But yeah, it should carry on tomorrow as well. So yeah, hopefully it'll get better. Oh, we've got India, awesome. Singapore as well. Yeah, a lot of Singapore. I see some familiar names in there, but I'm curious to see if there's anyone in somewhere else. I see Michael's here. Michael, where are you calling us from today? You in Thailand? Are you somewhere else? Oh, you're in Bangkok. Okay, cool. Singapore again. Yeah, a lot of Singapore. Other times we've had people from Sri Lanka, India. We had some people in Europe as well. Um, Harder to do the US. We are thinking about setting up a time for our members who are in that side of the world in that sense, just because of the time zone differences. But we're always open to any feedback. If anyone also is keen to do different slots and maybe in the morning or evenings or something like that, we can also look at that too. Cool. Okay. Well, let's kick off. Good to see everybody here. So Lindy, maybe you want to just introduce yourself a little bit and then we'll jump into the slides. And then for everyone else, what we'll do for the format is kind of similar to what we did last week. So for those obviously who might not have joined last week, we had a guest Mo who was kind of digging into the topic of insurance, the complicated jargon and things like that, and trying to make it simpler. So today, Lindy has prepared some of her top tips in a kind of a slide format, and then we'll jump into some questions. So we'll have Q&A. So just for everyone, if you've not used Q&A with Zoom before, there's a little button at the bottom that says Q&A, and if you click that, you can ask your question in there. If you want to ask it by unmuting yourself, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask it there. Or if you just want to type it in, that's fine. I would say if possible to put the Q&A in that bit, just because when it goes in the chat, sometimes it gets a little bit lost along the other messages. But that's all. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for any, we'll just to catch up with some of the members and see what they're up to as well. So yeah, hopefully that's all clear. And we'll kick off, Lindy, when you're ready.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindy, and thanks for joining me on this gray and gloomy day in Singapore. I hope everyone has some coffee or a drink beside you. But anyway, so a little bit about my background. So I grew up in Singapore, but I've actually lived in the US as well as Europe, either for school or for work. And I started my career actually with the Singapore government at the Singapore Economic Development Board. So I was there for about 8 years. And the sort of work that I was doing was really more about promoting Singapore as an investment location, charting out long-term strategic growth plans for key industries in Singapore, and working with a lot of foreign companies to create jobs in Singapore. And after that, because I felt a little bit bored with what I was doing, that actually made me leave the government to actually move into the private sector. And that's when I joined Expedia. And so I was there as part of that global strategy and transformation team. And that was amazing because I love travel, and having the opportunity to work in travel and to understand how the business works, to understand when to get the best deals for my own holidays. That was an amazing experience. Really enjoyed it. And unfortunately, with COVID, it's not very fun working for a travel company when there's no travel. So that's when I actually pivoted and moved over to Meta, where I was heading up their Greater China team in trust and safety, and working very closely with the internal product and ops team to also make sure that the platform's safe for the different users internationally. Yeah, and I left Meta in mid 2023. So it's been about, I want to say about a year and a half now, to become an entrepreneur. So yeah, and right now I actually run Jump Mentors, which is a platform, a mentoring platform for mid-career professionals, where we provide career coaching as well as strategic career advice. I'm also doing a couple of other sort of side projects, including working with a friend to launch a lifestyle brand.
Brilliant. Thanks for that introduction. I think, yeah, it sounds like you've been on a really fun journey. You've been able to work across the world on different initiatives. Meta's fantastic company to get insight into as well, especially if you're working closely on the product side. And yeah, we all love a travel deal as well. So being able to get that insight is pretty useful as well. And how that industry has changed as well. It's undergone a lot of evolution of, where you might traditionally go to a physical travel agency in the past to kind of build out your itinerary, to then having it all at your fingertips. And now, interestingly, I'm noticing in that industry that there's a kind of a second rise of the travel agency again, or maybe the those that are kind of experts in a certain field. I think there's a lady who Yasas was working with, who's former Meta, is it Elena? So she's also like
Yeah,
now
Elena.
planning travel for groups and businesses and things like that as well, which is another interesting trend to see how that changes over time. So so how have you found so far that transition a year and a half in?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, shifting from corporate to being a business owner is such a different journey, right? Because, and I think, one of the biggest challenge for me is about, in a corporate setting, you
Mm.
have various teams supporting you, right? You have different resources to draw on. But as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, a lot of times, you need to figure things out, right? You almost become a little bit of a jack of all trades in some way, which maybe isn't that good because it sort of draws your focus away from the things that you're good at or that is most impactful. Yeah, so I must say it's been a big change, but I think one that is good as well. Like from a more sort of structured environment to one where you kind of have to go with the flow and
Yeah.
figure things out on the way, and also having to be very resourceful and reaching out to your network to help you understand new areas or get new ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point. Like, your experience is similar to other entrepreneurs that we've spoken to who've kind of gone from an environment where they maybe had other department support. Now, of course, you still probably had to do quite a lot within your own team and responsibilities and so on, but they're all of a sudden having to do a bunch of areas. Like, for example, a lot of entrepreneurs we speak to, that they don't necessarily understand like accounting and profit and loss and balance sheets and things like that. So to suddenly have to do that all yourself, the way I kind of describe it, especially for solopreneurs, is you're a business of one. So you have to have all the hats on all the same time. And I guess the slight shameless plug, I guess, and that's a little bit what we're trying to help with as well at Doerscircle, is to say, okay, can we free up some of your time by connecting you with service providers that can take some of that weight off, and then you can then focus more on how you build your business. If it's the strategy, is it in raising investment, is it getting product market fit, for example, that type of stuff. So yeah, hopefully will be able to help you moving forward as well, a bit more on things. But yeah, it'd be great to get into your tips, the things you've learned and that to share with the rest of the members. Can see
Yeah.
the thing going
Yeah,
well.
can you can see the screen? Okay, great. So I think, as we're talking about my journey, right? I think that really sort of set the ground for why I left corporate to start Jump Mentors. I think for myself, like my journey is one where it's a little bit maybe atypical, especially for a Singaporean, right? Where I think a lot of my peers would traditionally sort of either stay in the same sector or sort of be in the same functional job, right? And sort of move up and get promoted. But I think what I've seen and what I've experienced personally is that non-linear careers are definitely becoming the norm, right? For various reasons, which I'm not gonna, touch on today. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, making any sort of career switch is always challenging, whether it's from corporate to being an entrepreneur or even pivoting between industries or between different types of roles is a huge undertaking and is a challenge. And not everyone has access to the right mentors or networks to give you the right advice, or if you want to get the next promotion, how do you do it? And who can you talk to get tips? So that really inspired me to set up Jump Mentors. Just a little bit about what we do. So as I said, we are a mentoring platform. So we have about 14 mentors now from various sectors, tech, finance, etc. And we primarily help mid-career professionals with strategic career guidance, career coaching, etc. And I think what if I look back now in this like 1.5 year journey and sort of getting into the main topic for today, which is what I would do differently. I think one thing I would probably do differently is about uh like knowing that my baby is not necessarily the most beautiful baby out there, right? What does that actually mean? And I have on screen this like baby monster looking thing with like 3 eyes and like horns. So I think it's only I think it's only when I had my own human baby that I realized what this means, like I think my baby is the cutest thing in the world, right? But and it has been validated by a lot of people, not just my family members. But when it comes to your business, I think what I made the mistake of was that, hey, as I said earlier, I thought this was a great idea. Like if everyone had access to the right mentors, they could really accelerate their career. And I think initially when I started working on this, I was very fixated with, hey, you know what? Let's build out a platform of mentors from different industries. And to be honest, I wish I had spent actually more time validating this idea with a lot more people and not just friends, right?
Yeah,
Because I think the challenge is that, as a friend or even as a family member, oftentimes they have good intentions and they want to be supportive, but they may not be giving you the most objective advice.
yeah,
So if I had to do this again, I would probably do a survey, right, of potential customers, or even like be a lot more active in speaking to potential investors, right? Would anyone be willing to put their money in my business? Because I think that would be a great way to validate that indeed this is a real problem, right? And the idea, the solution I have is something that customers value and they would be willing to pay for.
yeah. I think that's a fair point, and yeah, we've all been in that territory with different situations where our friends and our family, they care about us and they don't want to burst your bubble in that sense. They want to encourage you. But yeah, especially like I can think of times I've maybe spoken to my mum in the past, and she might she doesn't want to necessarily say don't do it, it's a terrible idea, but maybe hope that you'll work it out in that sense. So yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the other thing is the community as well. I mean, especially Singapore is now such a thriving startup community. just talking about Singapore, but of course across Southeast Asia, there's a lot of innovation happening, and I suppose that's where there are tools and networks and communities that you can get that feedback that may be a little bit more, you just want someone to be critical, hopefully constructive, but yeah, to help you kind of progress along in that sense, so you're not maybe getting the happy years. We say that in the sales environment, happy years when you have a meeting with somebody and you think you're getting the good signals, but actually maybe there's an underlying concern or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I would probably also say be very open to pivoting, right? If the feedback that you're getting from various sources are pointing to, hey, your original idea may not be the best idea. So I think that's definitely one thing I wish I had done earlier
So did
in
you end
this
up having
journey.
to do quite a lot of pivoting then? Is that what happened?
So I think there's some I wouldn't say a lot of pivoting, but I would say it was more of a gradual thing, right? Where initially it was a lot more focused on maybe more of the B2C space, right? Sort of marketing to individuals. And now we're also starting to have conversations with corporates and
Yeah.
businesses on how we can, partner with them. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and I wish I had sort of maybe extended or tried out some of these pivots earlier.
Oh, that's good. That's a fair point. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Questions
So,
from anyone so far? I don't think I've not seen any yet in there, but we'll put them in as you go.
great. So again, love the problem, not the solution. I think that's one of my biggest takeaway from my experience so far. So moving on to my sort of second learning point, um, I think I also sort of fell in the trap of thinking, oh, because it's such a great idea, if I build it, they will come,
Mm.
right? So when I first launched Jump Mentors at the start of 2024, I actually launched it without a marketing plan. I had a website I spent like 3-4 months building out. I got in like my community of mentors. Um, I had like my social media accounts, but then there was no marketing plan. There was no go-to-market strategy, and obviously, I wouldn't recommend that doing that for any aspiring entrepreneur out there. Um, and the reason for that is because not a lot. I mean, not everyone is Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah.
Where for someone like him, where he's able to anticipate, right, what customers need even before customers realize it. Great, but for a lot of us, we're not like Steve Jobs, and a lot of times we definitely in a very crowded market. How do you actually get the word out there that hey, there's a new product or how there's a new service, right, that is of value to the customer? So I think definitely for me back then, especially sort of fresh off a corporate career, um, in the corporate, having a bias to action really served me well, right? But actually, when moving into the whole entrepreneurship space, sometimes it's better to maybe go slow before going fast, because it's really that initial stage of spending that time to really understand your customer, right? Defining what is it that they need, um, what channels can you actually reach them, um, how you how will they actually say purchase this product or service from you? Is it competitive? I think spending that time upfront to actually understand more about your customer, designing your go-to-market strategy would definitely serve you um,
Yeah.
when you eventually launch your own service or product in the market.
Were there any tools or resources that kind of helped you create that strategy? Because as you said, you're right. Like if you've never done it before and suddenly you've got a new business idea and you might be, an inventor mindset in that sense, then how would you necessarily know how to do the go-to-market bit, especially if you don't have any staff or anything like that? So was there anything you'd recommend for that would help other entrepreneurs?
Um, so I would probably say, so what I found helpful right, was talking to friends that have experience in this space about launching their own business, right? Other sort of resources I tapped on were, for instance, there was a program I attended for aspiring women entrepreneurs, right, where there were different sort of workshops, right, talking about marketing strategies, etc. So I thought, so for me, I found that helpful just to get some ideas about, different ways, right, of marketing my business and getting the word out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I would say it really depends on the type of business that you have. But looking at competitors and what they're doing is also probably a good way to maybe benchmark yourself. So I did a little bit of that, looking at similar platforms, say in the US, for instance, and their sort of like marketing or advertising efforts. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I was going to say just to add on top of that as well. There's a lady that I came in. So I've not been an entrepreneur in a sense, but I've had to be the first person on the ground in Asia for other businesses. So I kind of treated that as like a mini business, and how could I get our name out there a little bit more? And I stumbled across a number of years ago now. There's a lady called Kat Williams Triloa. She works at Intuit now, but she used to have a business in Singapore called Humanization. And she put together this really good go-to-market guide. I think it's like maybe 40, 50 pages long, and it kind of breaks down all the different steps. And it is quite focused on how would you go to market in Asia Pacific. So for those who are here in Asia Pacific, it's relevant for you. Those maybe not less so. But I do have a copy of that. So if anybody is interested in having a look at that, I can share that afterwards as well. Just pop me a note, because I found that quite helpful as well. I think it's things like identifying your ideal customer profile. What's the market that you could potentially tap into? Because we always, I see it in these like investor decks. Somebody says, "Oh, our market size is $5 billion or something," but it's also where can you realistically play to get started, and then of course, you want to be ambitious and you believe in your baby in that sense. So it's just then how do you step that up rather than necessarily saying, because certainly this type of strategy you just mentioned, if you know your go-to-market strategy, it's going to help you get investors. It's also going to help you attract talent when you want to hire, because they want to know, okay, what's your vision, what's your plan? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's super important.
Actually, one thing that I did sort of find helpful, which anyone can have access to, is this thing called Business Model Canvas. I'm not sure if you've
Okay.
come across that, Jamie,
No, no.
but it's like a framework on a single sheet of paper where it sort of lays out like the different considerations, right? Which is, what are the costs, right? Potential
Mhm.
costs of your business or your customers. What's the value? What are the resources you have, etc. So I think it just provides a very good overview of like the different things you should think about, and it helps you to clarify some of your thoughts about really, what is the value that you're providing, and is there a different customer segment that you should be targeting.
Great. I just put the wiki link in the chat. Obviously, I'm sure there's probably a better version it links to, but just for everyone else as well, if you look at that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. No,
Um,
getting the resources. That's good.
so maybe moving on to the next point,
Yeah.
which is know your strengths and get help with everything else. I think the other trap that I fell into was trying to do everything myself, right? And I think initially it was like, hey, like this is going to be my full time job now. Why should I pay someone else, right, to design a poster for social media, or uh, like or design an ad, right, that I can launch on Facebook or Instagram, etc. But I think what I quickly realized was that it was just not sustainable, right? Because obviously, for me, my background is more in strategy and partnerships, and I'm definitely not gifted at at designing like Instagram posters, etc. So that took a lot of energy from me, actually. And actually, what I ended up doing for some of these stuff was look on platforms like Fiverr, for instance,
Yeah.
right? So I hired a company based out of Pakistan that managed my sort of social media accounts. So that was great, right? Because I initially really dreaded doing that because that didn't give me much joy. Yeah, but I would say definitely figure out what is it that energizes you, what are your strengths, and then focus on that, and then either outsource or get help from family or friends or somewhere else for everything else that you need for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've heard that one a lot as well. I think we'd all love to do all the things if we could in that sense, but yeah, some things are just either become an anchor on us, they're dragging us down from the other bits we want to do, or we just, maybe in our head we know what it looks like, the look and feel, but it's just being able to then get that onto the canvas is another story in a sense. So it's good that you found those sources, and of course, yeah, they're great resources somewhere like Fiverr to get those. I used one some years ago to help me do some speech writing. I guess now also, maybe we won't open up that can of worms too much, but then you have tools, AI tools that can help you do some of those things.
Yeah, like ChatGPT, for
Yeah,
instance. If you need like some ideas
yeah.
for the copy editing of your website, for instance, I would say some of these tools are definitely very handy and they're free as well.
Yeah, fantastic. We do have a question actually, which I feel was relevant a little bit maybe to the last point. So sorry, Marcella, for jumping ahead on that one, but maybe just as just before we like move on to another topic in that sense is, so Marcella said, thanks for sharing your experience. So she appreciates that. She said she often hears things like there's no perfect product when you first launch, and that maybe founders should pivot early and not stick with the first idea. So a question was, when you mentioned having a marketing plan or go-to-market plan, how far ahead would you say is realistic to plan for? Is 1 year too far, or should it be even longer, for example? And then the sort of second part of that question was, how do I know if I'm ready to launch?
So firstly, like everyone's journey is quite different, right? Especially, again, depending on the sort of business idea that you have. But I think from my experience, um, I I would actually say I think it depends on what is it that you're trying to test, right? What is the minimum viable product that you're trying to put out there, and what are some of these milestones that you need to see in order to give you confidence that you should hunker down and push on with this idea, or hey, you need to sort of pivot, or maybe target a different customer segment or a different market, for instance. Um, so so I would probably say, and happy to also hear from the rest of the group, but I would probably say, having like at least like a maybe like a 1 to 2 month sort of marketing plan is good, right? Which is because if in that maybe and again, like the customer cycles and the sales cycles would differ very much, right, from different products or for different services. But I think if some of the initial signals that you're getting based on your marketing efforts is not working out, right? You're not getting any customer interest,
Mm.
then you probably need to sort of figure out, is it a marketing issue, right? Meaning, are you marketing through the right channels, right? If you are and you're reaching like the right customers, then why are they not interested, right? Is it a product issue? Is it too expensive or something else? Yeah, so I would say it depends, but I would say at least having a plan that you can stick to for the first few months would be a good start.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, and the only little bits I would add on as well is, yeah, that it's hard to put a time frame on it because you don't necessarily, if you're so early in that journey, you're still figuring out whether there is a fit. And I think you raised a really good point around, you see mention in the world of like MVP, the minimum viable product. I think is a good start point to say, like, what is the bare minimum I need to do to be able to get the concept out? Because the sooner you get that idea concept, product, solution, whatever it is out, the sooner you can start getting that interest on it as well. And there is a book, Marcella, I would recommend. If you've heard of the website AppSumo, maybe you have or you haven't, there's a guy called Noah Kagan who's actually one of the early guys at Meta. And then he got fired, as he likes to talk about as well. But he's got a book which he released, I think, last year called $1 Million Weekend. And, you know, obviously it's a little bit clickbaity in the title in a sense, but the whole point is that, you know, you can build a business idea, test it, and get some initial feedback within a really short period of time without having to go and do all the design, all of the social media and everything first. And so I would recommend having a look at that book. It's not a very long book either, and it's not, and he's quite adamant on how he had it all written by I can't remember the guy who did it now. It was yeah, it was someone who wrote another book that he liked, and that's why he commissioned that guy to do it. So he didn't actually write it himself per se. I think he had it ghostwritten. But that, I think, answers some of your questions as well about how to, you know, when to pivot and everything like that as well. So would recommend it. Awesome. Thanks for the question. When you're ready, Lindy.
Thanks, Jamie. So the next takeaway for me from my journey is that life happens, right? I think as an entrepreneur, cash flow was super important, right? So like I was and am still funding my different sort of business interests and projects I'm working on. And and I would probably say if I had to redo this again, I would probably want to have maybe a side income, like not leave my corporate job right away and sort of, you know, plunge right into the world of entrepreneurship. But maybe, you know, take a part-time role, right? Or maybe have another sort of side gig that would give me some sort of side income. Because I think for me, when I first left corporate, I gave myself a timeline of, say, 1 year, right? To sort of try out my hand at being a business owner, entrepreneur. If it doesn't work out, I'll just find a full-time job, right? But then life happens, right? So even though I did plan, right, to have enough financial resources to sustain me, but then I started a family and I had a baby as well. And unfortunately, in Singapore, having a baby is pretty expensive. Diapers, formula, and all that. So that sort of dug into some of the financial buffer I had set aside to fund my entrepreneurship journey. So I would say definitely think about uh, how much you might need for that initial sort of time frame you have in mind, and then multiply that by like 1.5 just to give yourself a little bit of buffer, right? And as I said, definitely look into other sources of income that you can have in the meantime. Could be from investments or sort of consulting gigs that you can do on the side, which I started doing, I think, end of last year as well, which I think helps. So yeah.
Yeah, I think all really good advice. And I had a question for you. And to be honest, I don't know the answer to this because I've only ever worked in kind of like startup or scale up environments in that sense. But from your days, and I should preface this question that I know every business is a bit different, but given you've worked at some really large companies, is is there is there a willingness, is there an acceptance that you could do something on the side so long as it doesn't interrupt your kind of day to day if you're working in these corporate environments? Like, does it feel like you could say, right, if I do my evenings and weekends or whatever it is, I can work on this project and it's not going to cause any friction if you're working in a corporate company?
I think it really depends on the organization you work for and how open they are with that. I think so. For instance, having been in both government
Yeah.
and and tech, I would say probably, you know, if you're working for the Singapore government, they might be a little bit um, more conservative, especially if there's any sort of potential conflict of interest, right? But I had colleagues back when I was in the government that were really passionate about singing, and they were doing side gigs as wedding singers,
Okay.
and there's no conflict of interest at all,
Yeah.
right, for their job. So they're perfectly fine to do that during their time off, from work, whether it's during the weekends or after work.
Yeah.
Again, I think when I was working at Expedia and I was approached to do some business consulting with an external company, I was actually stopped from doing that because they're worried about potential conflict of interest, especially if the even though the consulting project wasn't about the travel industry, right? But there were still concerns from Expedia back then. So I would say it really depends on the company, but as long as you're able to demonstrate that there's no conflict of interest, I would say why not? Yeah,
Yeah.
and it always helps to have very diverse income streams, so that you actually protect yourself if your full-time job doesn't quite work out.
Yeah, and you never know. Hopefully, there's not going to be any more global pandemics. But yeah, the fact that that kind of caught everyone by surprise, and all of a sudden, people were having to change um, industries and jobs and locations and everything. So yeah, it can be quite tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, so dream big, but definitely budget bigger. Having that cash flow and access to cash flow would definitely help sustain your entrepreneurship dream a bit longer. The next point I have is about figuring out how you work as an individual and whether you answering to yourself is something that sort of gives you that momentum and pushes you forward, right, in your journey as an entrepreneur. So the reason why, for me, this is such an important point I wanted to highlight today is because in corporate, right, I had managers to answer to, I had stakeholders to answer to, and oftentimes, because of that external accountability, I was pushing myself, right, to deliver work on time, to make sure I meet all the deadlines. But as an entrepreneur, you're the one that's sort of setting these deadlines for yourself, right? Especially if you don't have a co-founder and you're working by yourself. Um, and when deadlines become too flexible, uh, this is where sort of things start shifting, right? Like you may not sort of deliver or end up working on something that is important because something else got in the way, right? And it's very easy to say, okay, it's okay, I'll do it next week. That's fine. But then next week becomes next month,
Yeah.
right? So I think for me, what I found helpful was having an accountability partner. So in my case, I actually found one of my peers, who's also a mentor on Jump Mentors, to actually have bi-weekly check-ins with me where I would describe my plans for the business. I would actually make sure that he would hold me accountable for what I said I would do, like say 2 weeks ago. And if I didn't do it, then I gave him uh, the right to sort of question me and ask me like, hey, what's going on here? Why are you not doing this? Why are timelines slipping? So that actually got me on track with my business plans.
And yeah, I've heard that one as well, and I think that's a fantastic point as well. I suppose like how do you put that into practice? I guess in this scenario, I'm sort of referencing back what we spoke about a little bit earlier, where the kind of ugly baby syndrome, where maybe sometimes friends or family might say what they think we want to hear rather than maybe what we need to hear. So how would you go about finding that accountability part sense?
So first of all, I would say choose someone that isn't family,
Yeah.
because then it becomes a little bit less personal and something more objective, right? So for
Mhm.
instance, I would definitely not choose my husband as my accountability partner because I
Yeah.
know that would start fighting. uh, but in this case, I chose a friend, right, to be my accountability partner. And in this case, this friend is also a mentor on our side. So he knows what I'm doing. And he's able to also give me good advice, right, on how I should steer the business. Yeah, so I would say definitely choose someone who's not afraid to ask you tough questions, right? And to have like sort of tough conversations with you. And for me, I communicate very directly. So I also chose someone who is equally direct in his communication style.
Yeah, and you know what else I love about that idea as well? I think the fact then that we being a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a freelancer can be quite a lonely experience when you're, head down and you're working on something project or building something new, and it's just you at that moment. So to be able to even that accountability partner and have that regular interaction means that at least you have somebody who you feel is sharing in that journey. They're not, maybe they're not necessarily have that responsibility like you do, but yeah, by having that check-in, I think is great for that point of view too.
Yeah, definitely plus one on how being an entrepreneur can be a lonely journey. So I think tapping into your community, right? Even uh, networking events or joining a community like Doerscircle, I think would definitely help in terms of ideation or just having a village of people, right, that are going through the same experience and that you can lean on.
Yeah, great.
So great. So on to my last point, which is actually the sixth point, and as a bonus sort of takeaway is um, if you're planning to have a so firstly, think about whether you really need a co-founder, because maybe you don't need one. But if you really need a co-founder, and this is a friend, make sure it's someone that you don't mind potentially breaking up with down the road. The reason why I say that is because so Jump Mentors is a project, is a platform that I created on my own, right? And then the second business that I then jumped into is actually a lifestyle brand that I'm in the process of launching with a friend. And initially I thought, hey, it's like a good idea because, you know, it felt so lonely working on Job Mentor. So it's nice to have someone, right, to sort of work with you on a project, which
Yeah.
is true. But when you're working with a friend, uh, this becomes tricky because do you want to prioritize your friendship or do you want to prioritize business outcomes and results, right? So here's the example that I have. So I think when we started this, when we had this idea of like this lifestyle brand, what was great was that my friend had a very different set of skills that she was able to bring to the table. So she has more of a design background. Um, I'm more of a strategy background, supply chain, for etc.
Mhm.
So we're able to sort of marry the two and work on the concept where she's in charge of like the design and I'm in charge of like looking for suppliers, right? Great, but um, the problem we then faced was that she had a full-time job and she got really busy with a full-time job, right? And timelines started slipping, right? And because she's in charge of the design, I can't I can't go into production without having the design ready. So this is where I had to have like very tough conversations with her, which is like, hey, do you still want to do this? How important is this? When do you actually want to actually launch this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so and we eventually sort of agreed on a timeline, and we also sort of clarified some of the expectations that we have with each other. So I would definitely say if you're planning to work with a friend on a business idea, you need to first decide, do you want to prioritize your friendship or do you want to prioritize your business? Because there's going to be moments where you need to have a difficult conversation and you need to decide, okay, how hard do I push this business partner and friend, right? Do I want to push it to a point where this person might feel hurt
Yeah.
potentially, right? So yeah, it's tricky working with a friend as a business partner. If anything, I would probably say maybe avoid it, because if the business doesn't do well down the road, or if you get into any conflict, it's easier to walk away from someone that you don't necessarily want to maintain a friendship with down the road.
Yeah. And it's it can be the case as well that your friend and business partner might have a different expectation of what the business is to be. For them, they might see it as this is a side thing. It's a nice to have. It's a, it could be a hobby for them. Whereas for you, this could be, I need this to be my living. I need it. I want to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so matching those expectations can sometimes be quite difficult. I guess that's any founder, co-founder relationship in that sense, but especially with friends, because maybe, you're already so passionate about something, but then you kind of almost skip over that step because you don't want to be too like
Yeah.
eccentric in that sense. You don't want to, maybe it doesn't need to be as black and white with a friend. So, but I think, yeah, it's a fair point. And
Yeah. And I would probably also say um it is probably helpful to have a formal agreement
mm,
with your friend in terms of whether it's equity split or in terms of like roles and responsibilities, etc. Just so that you don't, if anything goes wrong down the road, at least you're also able to protect yourself as a co-founder of this business.
yeah, and I guess I know you touched on it a little bit, but like, how's your experience been building something a solo versus as a co-founder? Did you find from a positive, I guess, point of view, like was it easier for you to, maybe you can offset some of the things you're working on, or did you still find that you were doing as much as you were as solo?
Um, I think what was helpful was having someone else with different strengths, work on it with me, right? So I think then when we delegated work, it was great because I was doing stuff that I enjoyed doing, or I was doing a part of the business that I enjoyed doing, versus trying to learn new skills
Yeah,
like designing something on Figma, etc., right? Which like I don't have the passion for. So that part, say my co-founder actually worked on it. Yeah. So I would, but yeah, but I mean, both has its pros and cons. And I think it really depends on what is it that you need for the business, right? If you're able to outsource something,
mhm,
maybe that's a better way. Maybe you don't need a co-founder,
yeah,
right? So I think just be very clear about why do you need a co-founder? What is the value that this co-founder would bring? Um, and also what, is your vision aligned? Are the expectations also aligned? I think those are very important
yeah.
questions.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and and just the last thing I would add in on that as well, and it was an event I went to a couple of months ago where there was a lot of like VCs and other investors. And there are some investors, at least in Singapore and other parts of Southeast Asia, that they'll only invest in companies that have co-founders because they want that kind of separated, maybe not all on one person's shoulders in a sense. But then there are other people in the same event that were saying, I actually see maybe when it's co-founders, it's a flag because of what we mentioned just now about the potential that things can break up and it gets a little bit messy in that sense. So yeah, even that point of view, I guess, once you set your expectations, you also then want to think, okay, how does this scale? And if it does scale, who's going to be the right kind of outside source to support us with that as well, because it might not always be feasible for certain organizations based on how they invest now.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that point, Jamie, from what you mentioned about how some VCs prefer
Yeah,
startups with like two or more co-founders. I think part of the reason is also from, like a maybe well, the longevity of the business, right? If something happens to one co-founder, at least there's someone
yeah,
else that's familiar with the business
yeah.
and can continue to scale it. Great. So I think that's actually all the points I wanted to cover in today's session. Uh, and happy to take any questions. So again, feel free to check out Jump Mentors, where we offer career coaching as well as mentorship. And there is a promo code for those of you who are attending the session today and are interested to book a session with me over there.
Yeah, so please do jump on that. As you can see, the code is Doerscircle. Shouldn't be easy to forget, and you can get a first discount on that, which is awesome. I can see there in the slide it says by the end of April. So yeah, you've got just over a month and a bit, and you can take advantage of that as well. So yeah, hopefully, I think yeah, I think sometimes we could all use that mentorship, and it's not always easy to find those people as well. So it's really great that you're building that space for people.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. So questions. Let's look at the Q&A. Okay, we've got one just came in. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was on the wrong page. So pricing, what's the best way to price our beautiful baby, and how often is it okay to test out the pricing? So I suppose maybe like yours being slightly more sort of service rather than product in a sense, like how did you test out pricing with what you're doing, and how often maybe you changed it?
Yeah. I would, so how I went about it, and again, happy to hear how others approached it, was I looked at competitors, right? I looked at similar platforms like Jump Mentors. I looked at similar businesses, maybe not exactly, say, mentoring uh, or coaching, but even like consulting, right?
Mm,
So some of these expert networks, for instance, like how do experts there actually price their services? So I think that was how I derived the pricing for Jump Mentors. But for our mentors, they actually have they can actually set their own pricing, but we actually recommend a certain range for them based on the experience as well. But I would definitely say, in terms of pricing strategy, look at what's out there in the market, right? If you're trying to price slightly higher or slightly lower, then figure out what is it that you can offer, right? That's different, right? So for instance, if your product's going to be more expensive, why would it be more expensive? Is it because you're adding on something else that your competitors don't are not providing,
yeah.
right? And that's why you're able to price it at a slightly higher price? Or is it your intent as a newcomer to the market that you want to just gain market share, or sort of just get a few customers in and get referrals? Then maybe it makes sense to actually have cheaper pricing. But do you want to do it by offering a discount,
Mm,
right? Or do you want to actually adjust the actual retail price? So I would say it really depends on the business as well.
yeah. No, that's good advice. I think, yeah, that competitive analysis. I think I
I
can't
can't
remember the name of the matrix off the top of my head, but there's like the matrix that has like cheap, good, and fast, and then one more, and it's like you can't necessarily be cheap and good, or good and fast, and so it's about picking those sorts of areas from a service. But I think, yeah, you're right about being able to then define where where do you sit. If you're offering a premium service, maybe it comes with additional support that they wouldn't usually get, like maybe other businesses are outsourcing that, or they don't do it at all. So yeah, it's good. I think that's good feedback. Thank you for that. Hopefully that
Yeah,
answers your
question.
question. Sorry, yes, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Lindy, for sharing your story. And really proud of you as well. We worked together at Meta, and to see you grow as a founder and entrepreneur, really happy and proud. Just a question on time management, Lindy. You mentioned that you have another business now, kind of developing like a lifestyle business, and you have Jump Mentors as well. Just to see like how you prioritize which kind of business to focus, business activity to focus in between these two businesses. And then you also have a family life, and you said you had a baby. So how do you kind of manage all this as a founder? I think it will be helpful for our community if you speak about that as well, because when we speak to founders, sometimes they say burnout is quite common as well, because as you said, you have a manager at work who kind of in a way help you manage your workload in a way, and you have timelines managed through the processes at a company, whereas now you are on your own. So it'd be interesting and helpful for our community if you speak about that side as well.
Yeah, thanks, Yesus, for the question. So I must say I'm not the best at time management. It's still something I'm learning to do, especially, with like a baby in the house. I would say so firstly, on a family front, if you don't have kids, that's great. Because then I think it's easier to manage, like whether it's your partner or your parents or whatever, right? Like they can sort out themselves. But when you have kids or when you have a baby, like then you have to be like, oh, I'm a parent as well. Like, how do I spend meaningful quality time with my baby and not just like outsource my baby to like someone else? But I would definitely say, since having a baby, I think having help at home is like super important, right? I would say it's even more important than say working in a full-time job in a corporate. Reason being that I think as a business owner or an entrepreneur, um, you don't have defined hours anymore, right? It's not like, oh, at 5 p.m. I can sort of log off and just do my own thing. No, because like I'm like thinking about job mentors. I'm thinking about like some of the other businesses I'm working on at night before I sleep, when I wake up, weekends. So I think the risk of burnout is real, right? Because some of these lines between like your work versus your personal life becomes very blurred. I think and I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. But I would say right now, I like to make sure I spend at least like I want to say like 2 good hours, right, with my baby, where I can say, okay, I'm done for the day. I've been a good mother. All right, now I can move on and like sort of work on these other stuff that I need to do for the business, right? Um, yeah, so I don't know if anyone else has any like good tips about balancing family and work, but that's one thing I'm doing. In terms of splitting my time between like my different um businesses, so in terms of timeline, so I started Jump Mentors first, and I think it was only after I had sort of launched the site, I sort of kickstarted, like some of these marketing plans, that I started working and developing this lifestyle brand with a friend. Um, so I would say that helped, that, Jump Mentors was at a state where it was more of on autopilot mode, I would say.
Mhm.
And then because I think a lot of the effort for me at least is the initial ideation, right? And conceptualization. What is the brand story, the brand identity? What is the customer segment? So for me, that takes up a lot of time and initially. So I think that sort of helped me to allocate my time between the two businesses. Yeah, but as I said, right now it's still a struggle with time management. I'm still trying to figure out what's a good way
The thing you
to do
said
it.
earlier, I think resonated as well. The fact that you said go a bit slower. It's not necessarily about, going 100 miles an hour, and this can apply to that as well. You have to juggle everything, right? If you've got family commitments, you've got other work if you are working still in a corporate environment, maybe, and this is your side project. So yeah, I think it's what you can manage rather than, as Yas has mentioned, you don't really want to go into burnout. And I'm sort of mindful just of the time actually, but there was another question which is relevant to this, which was in 1 year, where would you ideally want to be on this journey? I guess from your point of view, I know every journey is different in that sense, but where would you think is a good place, maybe from a year from now, if you started?
Well, so thanks for attending the call, Masa. Great to see you here. Wow, like that's a tough question because I haven't thought that far yet.
Yeah,
Like it's always about like, all right, like what am I gonna do tomorrow versus like a year from now? But I would say I can tell you where I want to be when I
yeah.
retire, but
Okay.
I can't tell you where I want to be in a year's time. I think for me, the one of the reasons why I started on this journey is because I know that eventually, when I retire, when I'm like 80 years old or 70 years old, I want to be a business owner, right? It can be any business, and it will probably be very different from whatever I'm doing right now, right? Because businesses come and go, like what there's a statistic that says like what 98% of startups fail, right?
Yeah.
But for me, like I want to be a business owner when I'm at 70 or 80 or 60, right? An experience that I'm actually gaining from starting Jump Mentors, I believe, is going to help me sort of get there, right? Eventually. But as I said, life happens, life is very unpredictable. So I have no idea where I'm going to be in 1 year's time. But I think what I'm working towards is a much longer term goal of transitioning into a business owner full time, whatever that business
Yeah.
might
I
be.
like that because if you have a longer term goal, you can then start to see, okay, how do I break that into manageable chunks rather than necessarily setting an arbitrary date now and not necessarily knowing, because like something could go really fast in a year, or it might just take a bit longer because you're still working out product market fit and that side of things as well, or still building your audience. And then all of a sudden, then it can suddenly go a lot faster. So yeah, it does definitely depend on your business, your own ambitions. But yeah, we're rooting for you. So maybe we'll
Thank
do
you.
another session in 50 years from now or something like that, and we can we can see where we're at. Yeah. Although who knows what it'll be like at that point? There probably won't be Zoom,
Yeah.
something else. Maybe we're like dialed into our brains or something.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions just before we wrap up? Because we're a little bit over time, but I think we're okay. I think there's a few more. Speak now, or you can always follow up with Lindy or us separately if you need to as well.
Yeah.
And
Feel free to ping me. I'm on LinkedIn, or drop me an email at Jump
yeah,
Mentors. Yeah.
yeah. Do you want to just put the URL in the chat as well, just so that nobody
Sure.
that one? Um, and then while you're doing that, yes, do you want to just tell what we're going to do next week as well? And also,
Yep, next week we have this weekly session again. Same time, by the way, Wednesday, 3 p.m. Singapore time, if you want to mark your calendars. And next week we will be having a conversation about freelancing, future of freelancing. And we would be having a conversation with some of the experts here at Doerscircle and also engaging the industry. But it'll be more like a conversation rather than having one speaker like we've done in the last few weeks. So would like to invite everyone to join next week. And yeah, we can have a good conversation about being a freelancer, being a solopreneur, how to run it like a business, and how to get support that you need, and everything like that as well.
great. You want to unmute? Thank you again, Lindy, for joining us. Really, really appreciate it, and thanks for sharing your journey. It sounds like you're well on track with Jump Mentors, but it's a building block in that overall, journey of your career and where you want to get to. So yeah, thanks for sharing us a bit of that, and hopefully those on the call found that also inspiring for them.
Thanks, Jamie, for having me. It's always a work in progress. So if anyone has any ideas on how I can scale my business, definitely reach out, and I would love to connect.
Good stuff. We'll. Yeah. And for those, we'll share the recording around as well after the call. So yeah, you can always come back to this later. Brilliant. Thanks, Lindy. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Stay dry if you're in Singapore. Speak soon.